For the longest time, that story was my nightmare. I couldn't sleep. I didn't go to work for weeks. I had to take a leave of absence. I couldn't function. The voices of my kids screaming, the look on their faces as they were about to go over these falls haunted my every day for years. My name is Malerie. I have 3 kiddos, Hunter, who is 9, Cadence, who is 8, and I have Abigail, who is 5. On August 8th of 2020, my family and I decided to take a spontaneous day trip to Gooseberry Waterfalls. The kids were a little stir crazy by the time we got up there, but it was packed. My husband was walking with the kids on a path, and my son wanted to cross to where I was, but as he turned to go the opposite direction, he actually slipped and he went down the rock, and my daughter, she went to go grab him and she slipped with him. And it was like I had no control over my body anymore. And a voice washed over me and said they were okay. And I was washed with this peace, and I didn't understand it. How could they be okay? I'm going to get to the bottom, and what if they're not there? What if they went down the next fall? What if, worst case scenario, they weren't alive anymore and I didn't get to them? My son, he was lifeless when he was pulled from the water. He was face down. Eventually, they got them on backboards and were going to transport them. They needed to be helicoptered down to Duluth. And it was about an hour and a half before we finally got to the hospital. They were both back in imaging. My son had come back first, and they said he had a severe concussion. And a couple hours had passed where they monitored him, and they actually discharged him that night. He was able to leave the hospital walking and talking. Right as they were discharging my son, my daughter had finished all her scans. She had more severe trauma. She needed stitches in her thumb. She had busted her elbow. She shattered her nose and needed stitches, and she had a concussion, a more severe concussion than my son did. And we had to wait for a lot of specialists to clear her. And less than 24 hours after falling, it was 40 feet that they fell. Less than 24 hours, she also left that hospital walking and talking. When we loaded the kids up that day to drive home, I asked them how they were feeling emotionally. And my son was calm. He had no fear, no nothing. He said, I was good. The guy told me I'd be okay. And I was like, what guy? And he said that he saw himself floating, and he was told that he'd be okay. And he, since then, has never spoken to me again about it. So now I know it was the Holy Spirit. I didn't know it then. My daughter still has a little bit of trauma. She actually will go through her last surgery to correct her face. And for the longest time, that story was my nightmare. I couldn't sleep. I didn't go to work for weeks. I had to take a leave of absence. I couldn't function. The voices of my kids screaming, the look on their faces as they were about to go over these falls haunted my every day for years. And I found a relationship with God, and it stopped. And it wasn't until I fully understood the miracle that happened that day that I stopped looking at it as a nightmare. We built a relationship. My kids found a relationship with God. I found a relationship that I never thought I would ever have with him. I didn't think I was deserving of it. I held on to a lot of my past mistakes and regrets and thought, how could someone forgive me for things that I have done? How could someone love me that way? And I went through the mentor program, and I actually, in those 30 days, was able to forgive myself and let that go, let those burdens go. And so the next step was baptism. I was a new person. I was not who I was anymore. I was no longer defined by my past, and I was new. And I needed to take that next step to be the new version of me. And so I got baptized. I remember when I was being dunked under, the brightest blue was washed over me, and it was just this overwhelming sensation because I knew that I was new when I rose again. My kids did get baptized. Hunter and Cadence both decided they actually had been wanting to do it for a while, and I wanted to make sure that they fully understood what it meant to get baptized. and they both got baptized, and we're so overwhelmed with joy to be able to continue their walk with God as well. If you haven't been baptized and are questioning if you should, just remember that you are not who you used to be. And what better way to show that you are a new person than to be made new through baptism?